that our understanding of a religious doctrine is sound, but that if we hold out for future science, we'll be vindicated. Scientific revolutions happen. Current understanding is frequently replaced by something completely new. The trouble with this strategy is that in many cases it's simply extremely implausible that new science is going to help. It is true, scientific revolutions happen. It is true that science corrects mistakes in earlier accepted science. But at least judging from the past, science never completely overturns the current understanding. So the mass of evidence, right, that supported the previous view is not overturned. It's still evidence, it's just understood and organized in a different way. So to extend the example, again, to biblical creationism, it's reasonable to hope that evolutionary theory will refine and ramify and change, but it's simply not reasonable to hope that we will return to a pre-Darwinian understanding. The facts about fossil dating and genetic transmission of characteristics must be part of any future biology. And so there's no room for either a 6,000-year-old Earth or for completely unrelated, independently created species. We may give up on the Big Bang, but we will never go back to the crystal spheres around Earth at the center of the universe. So if a religious doctrine seems to require a pre-modern understanding of some part of the universe, it's really not a reasonable strategy to hold out for new scientific discoveries to vindicate the pre-modern view. So, back to the Hizmet movement. Since the Hizmet movement is committed to both the value of science and the divine origin of the Quran, in its origins at least, right? There seems to be no option but to be brave optimists. And so far, that seems to have worked for them. The only question for them to consider is about possible future conflicts. Pessimism of both kinds is untenable for them, as is cowardly optimism. And likewise, the prospects are bleak for science to give up current theories to revert to earlier ones. So, the only thing left is to admit fallibility and be prepared to abandon cherished interpretations of Scripture and explore new ways of understanding it. Courage sometimes requires sacrifice. Thank you. I'm going to go sit down again. This is hard on the feet.
So thank you, Professor. And now you have some time for questions and answers. Okay, so I'll start with one. More a kind of curiosity. I'd like to hear your thoughts about how those beliefs would relate with politics. So what kind of effect this kind of education, because in the end you have a religious education, how this will affect political beliefs and political actions when those citizens come to age?
Yeah, that's a, yes, good, okay. That's an interesting and deep question. I know that the strategy of the movement has been, from the beginning, not to align itself with anyone politically. The idea being, we're going to have to work with whatever government is there. And so we don't want to tie our fortunes to any particular government. Of course, some political parties, I never have learned not to do the thing. Some political parties are sort of more friendly to the ideas of Hizmet. But even so, you know, individuals, there's sort of no official, thank you, there's no official Hizmet political line. But of course, you know, you might wonder, just as a lot of Christians think the Bible has things to say about politics, a lot of Muslims think the Quran has a lot of things to say about politics. Some of it, like ISIS, I think we can dismiss as lunatic, but there are resources in the Quran that get taken this way. So, but Hizmet's approach has always been that just not to meddle in politics and not to. They want their students to be good citizens, and so they want them to participate as individuals in the political process, but they don't have a sort of party line.
Alguém mais? Se alguém quiser fazer perguntas em português também, a gente pode traduzir.
Let me ask.
Use your professor voice. For the recording, yeah.
Thank you. Oh, it's too loud. Well, I was wondering about some school regulations in some place in the world, perhaps even some states in the West, in which some kind of knowledge like intelligent design or creationism are inserted in school curriculum. In such a case, how could the schools of the movement deal with such a situation? Because you have to enforce the law, but you have to deal with which kind of knowledge you pass to the kids.
Yeah, that's a sort of practical version of the problem I was talking about. Yeah. You know, I'm not sure. I mean, I know that it's an important principle for Hizmet to obey the laws of whatever country they're in. And so far, fortunately, there is no jurisdiction in the U.S. that requires the teaching of these things, and so they can teach good science. But suppose, you know, Tennessee put it in the books. You're not allowed to teach evolution. You're only allowed to teach Noah's Ark and the flood and all that sort of stuff. I don't know how they would handle that. Which value would come first? I really think the dedication to truth and to knowledge. I mean, truthfulness and honesty are important values to them, and so I think they would say, I guess we can't have a school there. Or we can have a school, but we can't teach biology? I don't know. You guys know if, has this come up anywhere? I mean, there's a lot of countries in the world with a lot of laws. I've never heard of a case, but that's, yes, I mean, that's sort of the practical version of the epistemological problem. I know there are places in the world where schools have not been established because unfriendly governments place requirements on them that they can't meet, but it's like Iran. Can't think of another one, but that's what it takes. You know, it takes a hostile government to, well, like they may have in Turkey now. They have a hostile government to their own to their own activities. I guess I don't have a really good answer, but that's, yeah.
You have another question.
Dear Professor, I have a question too. As we know, in the world there are some modern approaches to the education, like Montessori model, Scar's model, multiple intelligence model. These schools, I don't know what's the exact number, but do they serve as a new approach to the education? And is it adaptable? Is it applicable for any country? I mean, any school can adopt a Montessori school, Montessori model, but this hizmet model, is it applicable for other education entities too? Thank you.
Yep, absolutely, it is. I don't know how likely it is that others will adopt it because of the degree of commitment it calls for. As far as sort of educational arrangement goes, it's, you know, pretty much the standard, a classroom with a subject, with a teacher, you know. But the chief difference in the hizmet model is the degree of commitment of the teachers, so that it's not just, you know, you're there for the school day and then you go home and forget about it. There's the personal commitment to the students where you sort of check in with their families to see if anything at home is, you know, needs help. The extra work with students after hours, you know, this is, that's the main difference. And I think, yes, that model not only could but should be adopted everywhere. Of course, finding teachers who are willing to do that. I know teachers, a lot of teachers that are willing to do that sort of thing, and in fact, in some ways, do it themselves because they do love education and they love the kids. But for many, it's a job, and they would say, work after hours? No, thank you, forget about it. So it takes a certain kind of, you would only be able to hire a certain kind of person as a teacher. And I would say in many ways, that's the kind of person that ought to be a teacher anyway. So.
Someone else? So,
I'm happy to go to lunch early.
so I'd like to thank you very much for coming so far. And we hope you can come back again at some point.
I hope so, too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, my pleasure.